My husband looked me dead in the eyes one evening and said, "You know what your problem is, Loretta? You spend money like it grows on the oak tree out back. From now on, every dollar you touch in this house, you're going to account for." I was 63 years old. I had worked as a registered nurse for 38 years. I had raised 2 children, buried a mother, sat with a dying father, and kept this household running through 3 job layoffs. His, not mine. And my husband of 31 years was standing in our kitchen in Greenville, South Carolina, telling me I needed to account for every dollar. I smiled. I didn't say a word. I just turned back to the stove and stirred my soup. That was the moment I decided things were going to change. I just hadn't figured out how yet. Let me back up a little, because this didn't come out of nowhere. My husband, I'll call him my husband because that's what he was, for better and for worse, had always been particular about money. When we first got married back in 1992, he was the one with the steady income. He worked in construction management, made good money, and I was finishing up my nursing degree while working part-time at a pediatric clinic. In those early years, it made sense that he handled the finances. I was busy. He was organized. It worked. But somewhere along the way, he handles the finances turned into he controls everything. I'm not sure exactly when it shifted. Maybe it was gradual, the way water wears down stone. By the time our kids were in middle school, I had my own income, a real income, not a small one, but somehow I was still asking permission to buy a new pair of shoes. I'd mention that the washing machine was making a noise and he'd say, "We'll see." I'd suggest we replace the cracked tile in the hallway, and he'd say, "That's not a priority right now." Meanwhile, he bought a boat. He bought a truck to pull the boat. He joined a golf club. None of those were discussions. Those were just announcements. I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself lots of things over the years. I told myself he was just old-fashioned, that he grew up watching his father handle all the money, and that was just how he learned to do things. I told myself that as long as the bills were paid and the kids were taken care of, it wasn't worth fighting about. I told myself I was lucky because at least he wasn't spending it on other women or gambling it away. But the truth is that by the time we hit our late 50s, I had been a practicing registered nurse for over 3 decades, bringing home a salary that was often higher than his, and I still felt like a teenager asking her daddy for an allowance. And I had let it get that way. That part was on me too. The comment about the oak tree came after I spent $400 on Thanksgiving. We had 12 people at our house. 12. I bought a 19-pound turkey, 2 pies from the bakery on Main Street because I was working a double the day before and didn't have time to bake from scratch. A good bottle of wine, fresh flowers for the table because it was a holiday, and I wanted it to look nice. And the usual groceries. Stuffing, sweet potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, the works. $412. I have the receipt somewhere. When he saw the credit card statement, you would have thought I bought a car. $412 for one meal, he said. Do you have any idea how much $400 is? I wanted to say, yes, I know exactly how much $400 is. I earned that before noon on a Tuesday. But I didn't say that. I said something about how it was a holiday and we had guests, and he said what he always said, which was some version of, "You just don't think about money the way I do." No, I didn't, because the way he thought about money was that it was his, and spending it on anything I wanted was wasteful, but spending it on anything he wanted was an investment. After the oak tree comment, something in me just quietly closed. Not with anger, not dramatically. It just closed, the way a door closes when the latch finally catches. I started paying attention. I started keeping notes, not out of revenge, at least not at first, more out of a kind of bone-tired clarity. I wanted to understand in actual numbers what I was contributing to this household versus what I was getting back. What I found when I sat down and really looked at it was this. I was contributing roughly 58% of our combined take-home income. I paid for all my own medical expenses. I bought most of the groceries. I handled every school-related expense for our grandchildren when they visited. Clothes, school supplies, anything their mother, our daughter, needed help with. I paid for my own car insurance and maintenance. I paid for every gift we gave, for every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation. I arranged and paid for our annual trip to see his sister in Arizona. I tipped the mail carrier at Christmas. I donated to the church building fund. He paid the mortgage and the utilities. That was it. That was his contribution to the household we shared. I sat with that spreadsheet for a long time. Now, I want to be fair. He is not a bad man in every way. He's not cruel. He has never raised a hand to me, never spoken to me with real ugliness. He's faithful as far as I know and believe. He can be funny. He loves our grandchildren with his whole heart. When my mother was dying, he drove me to the hospital every single night for 3 weeks without complaining once. There is good in him. I'm not standing here telling you there isn't, but good in some ways doesn't cancel out wrong in others. And the way he treated the subject of money in our marriage was wrong. It was dismissive, and it was controlling, and it made me feel small in my own home. And I had let it go on for too long. About 2 weeks after the oak tree comment, his birthday was coming up. He was turning 65. His whole family was coming in. His brother from Charlotte, his sister and her husband from Arizona, 2 nephews, their wives, their kids, a couple of old friends from his construction days, 18 people total. His mother had passed away a few years back, so his sister had taken over the role of family organizer, and she called me to discuss the plan. "We're thinking we'll all come to your place," she said cheerfully, as if she were doing me a favor. "It'll be easier than trying to find a restaurant that fits all of us. And you're such a good cook." I said, "Of course, we'd love to have everyone." And I meant it. I genuinely love feeding people. That's not the issue. The issue was what happened next. My husband got off the phone with his sister that same evening and came to find me in the living room. He sat down, looked very satisfied with himself, and said, "So the plan is we'll do the birthday dinner here. I'm thinking a real spread, brisket, maybe ribs, all the sides. Go all out." I said, "That sounds wonderful. What's your budget?" He looked at me like I'd asked him to solve a calculus problem. "Budget," he said. "Just get what you need." I said, "I want to know what you're comfortable spending." A dinner like that for 18 people with brisket and ribs and all the sides is going to run somewhere between $500 and $700 depending on what I buy and where. He frowned. "That seems like a lot." I kept my voice very even. "It is a lot. That's why I'm asking what you want to spend, so I can plan accordingly." He waved his hand. "Just don't go crazy." That was it. Just don't go crazy. No dollar amount. No acknowledgement that feeding 18 adults and children a full birthday dinner costs real money. Just don't go crazy. So I went to the grocery store and I bought exactly what I needed to make that dinner beautiful. Brisket from the butcher, the good one, not the supermarket. 2 racks of ribs, baked beans made from scratch, coleslaw, corn on the cob, macaroni and cheese because the grandkids always want it, cornbread, a big green salad, sweet tea by the gallon, lemonade for the kids, and his birthday cake from the bakery in town, the one he's gotten every year since I can remember, chocolate with caramel frosting. I spent $647. I kept every receipt. The dinner was wonderful. I won't pretend otherwise. His family was warm and loud and grateful. His brother gave a little toast. The grandkids ran around the backyard. His sister hugged me at the end of the night and said, "You always make everyone feel so welcome." I was on my feet for 11 hours that day, from the moment I started the brisket at 7 in the morning to the moment I finished washing the last pot after 10 at night. My husband did not ask if I needed help. He did not thank me in front of his family. At the end of the night, after everyone had gone, he sat down in his recliner with a beer and said, "Good party." 2 days later, He saw the credit card statement. $647. His voice went up in a way I hadn't heard since the Thanksgiving incident. Loretta, what on earth? I was ready. I had been ready. I sat down across from him at the kitchen table and I slid a piece of paper across to him. It was a detailed, itemized list. Every receipt. Brisket, $89. Ribs, $64. Produce and pantry items, $91. Beverages, $38. Birthday cake, $55, etc., all the way to the bottom where I had written the total. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. And, he said, and, I said, I want to talk about how we handle household expenses going forward, because I've been thinking about what you said, about me spending your money. And I realize you're right that we've never had a clear system, so I want to propose one. He sat back a little wary, but listening. I told him I put together a summary of what each of us had contributed to the household over the past 12 months. Not to fight about it. I said that clearly, just to get a clear picture, so we could make a fair plan going forward. I slid him that paper too. He looked at it for a long time. I had broken it down into categories: mortgage and utilities, his. Everything else in column after column, mine. Groceries, car maintenance, insurance, medical co-pays, school supplies, gifts, holiday expenses, household repairs that I had quietly taken care of when he said, "We'll see," for too long. The new water heater I had paid for myself 18 months ago when the old one finally gave out, and he said he didn't have the cash flow right month. At the bottom I had written two numbers: his annual contribution to household operations, excluding the mortgage and utilities, approximately $4,000. Mine, approximately $22,000. He was quiet for a long time. I didn't realize, he said finally. I know, I said. I didn't either until I wrote it down. Then I told him what I wanted. Not anger, not ultimatums, just clarity. I wanted a joint account for household expenses that we both contributed to proportionally. Not 50-50, because our incomes weren't equal, but proportionally, based on what each of us earned. I wanted any large purchase over $200 discussed in advance by both of us, not just him. I wanted to stop feeling like I needed to justify every dollar I spent while he bought golf club memberships without mentioning it. He was quiet for a long time after that. I hear you, he said. I waited. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, he said. I honestly didn't think it came across like that. I believed him. That was the saddest part, in a way. I believed that he genuinely hadn't seen it. He had grown up in a household where his father made the money and made the decisions, and his mother cooked and kept house and never questioned it, and he had married me thinking things would be roughly the same. And then over 30 years, he had never stopped to notice that they weren't the same at all. That I was working full-time and managing most of this household and still being made to feel like a dependent. I said, I know you didn't mean to, but it's been the reality of our marriage for a long time, and I'm 63 years old, and I don't want to spend whatever years I have left feeling like a guest in my own finances. Something shifted in his face when I said that. He looked for the first time in a long time, like he was actually seeing me. We talked for 2 hours that night. Real talk, the kind we hadn't had in years, maybe ever, on this particular subject. He told me some things I hadn't known, about the fear he carried about money, about watching his parents lose their house when he was 12, and how that had shaped him in ways he hadn't fully examined. I told him some things I'd been carrying too. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't a fight either. It was just two people finally saying true things out loud. We did set up the joint account. We did sit down with a financial planner, a woman named someone new, not from our usual circles, and work out a proportional contribution system that felt fair to both of us. He started asking me before making big purchases. I started actually telling him when I had a large expense coming up, rather than just quietly absorbing it and resenting it. Was it perfect? No, old habits don't disappear because you have one good conversation. There were slip-ups. There were moments when I had to remind him, and moments when he had to remind me, and moments when we both had to choose to keep trying instead of sliding back into the old patterns. But here is what I know now. 3 years later, I have not once since that night felt like I had to justify a grocery receipt. I have not once asked permission to buy something I needed. When the furnace needed replacing last winter, we sat down together and chose the new one together and wrote the check from the joint account together. And at Christmas last year, he gave me a card. Inside, in his handwriting, which is not pretty, he would be the first to tell you that he had written, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see you clearly. You deserved better than that, and I'm going to spend whatever years I have left making sure you know it." I cried. I'm not ashamed to say it. I stood in my kitchen on Christmas morning and I cried, and he stood there looking uncomfortable the way men do when they've made someone cry. And I reached out and took his hand. We're not the same couple we were before that birthday dinner. We are better. Not because I showed him a spreadsheet, and not because I waited 30 years to say what I should have said years earlier. We are better because at some point we both decided that clarity was worth the discomfort of getting there. I'm 66 years old now. I've worked hard my entire life. I have loved my family and kept this house and done more than my share, and I do not regret a single hour of it. But I will tell you this, and I mean it for anyone who is sitting in a situation like the one I was in. You are allowed to say, "This isn't working for me." You are allowed to put the numbers on the table and say, "Look at this, look at what I've been doing, and let's talk about what's fair." You are not asking for too much. You are asking for what you earned. The oak tree out back is still standing. It's a beautiful tree, and no, money doesn't grow on it. But I know exactly where mine comes from, and now so does he. I used to think that keeping the peace was the same thing as doing the right thing. For a long time, those two felt identical to me. I would swallow something that hurt, smooth it over, move on, and tell myself that was maturity, that was grace, that was what a good wife did. But somewhere in my 60s, I started to understand that there is a difference between patience and self-erasure. A real difference, and not a small one. What happened between my husband and me didn't resolve itself because I finally got angry enough to explode. It resolved because I did something harder than that. I sat down, I looked at the truth clearly, and I said it out loud without flinching. That took a kind of honesty I hadn't been practicing. Not honesty with him, honesty with high my stick, with myself first. Admitting that I had let this go on. Admitting that silence, year after year, had been its own kind of choice. There's a cause and effect to everything, even the quiet things. The way my husband spoke to me about money didn't appear out of nowhere. It grew in the space I gave it. Every time I said nothing, every time I absorbed the cost and let it go, I was teaching him, without meaning to, that it was acceptable. That is not blame, that is just how these things work. Actions have weight, and so does inaction. What I'm proud of, looking back, is not the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was just paper. What I'm proud of is that I chose to be truthful when it would have been easier to keep pretending. That required something from me, a kind of moral backbone I hadn't exercised in years. Not cruelty, not revenge, just the simple, steady refusal to keep accepting something I knew was wrong. That's what doing right looks like sometimes. Not dramatic, just clear. And then there was the thinking it required. I didn't walk into that kitchen table conversation on pure emotion. I had numbers. I had receipts. I had a full picture of a situation I had been living inside without ever really examining. That kind of clear-eyed thinking, gathering the facts, organizing them, presenting them without hysteria. That's what turned a grievance into a conversation. Feelings alone wouldn't have gotten us there. I needed to understand the situation before I could change it. But what I hold on to most is this. I stayed. Not out of fear, not out of habit. I stayed because I chose to, and I did the work that staying required. My husband and I were both in our 60s by then. Neither of us had unlimited time to waste on old patterns. It would have been easier in some ways to walk away and call it done. It took more out of me to sit there and say, I believe this can be better, and I am willing to find out. That kind of persistence. Not stubbornness, but genuine willingness to keep going when it's uncomfortable. That has been the thing in my life I am most grateful I didn't give up. I think about the woman I was before that birthday dinner. Capable, hard-working, loved in her own way, but slowly disappearing inside a dynamic she'd stopped questioning. And I think about who I was 3 years later, writing checks from a joint account with my own name on it, no longer needing to justify a grocery run to anyone. The oak tree is still out there. Same tree, same yard, but I walk past it differently now.